Welcome. Another episode of Deck Talk here, Matt Johnson. As you can see, it's a beautiful early summer's day out here. A lot of anglers are on the water here in Minnesota and across the open water season. No matter where you're at, you're targeting your favorite species. You have bass, you have muskies in a lot of the states, walleyes, panfish, you name it. You're out there enjoying the beautiful weather and the good scenery, catching fish on your favorite body of water. Today I want to touch on something very near and dear to my heart. The species I like to target quite often, that's going to be panfish. Yes, I'm a bass guy. I like to fish walleyes. I do chase some muskies. I chase about every species that swims in fresh water, but I like to really focus my efforts on panfish much of the year. And a lot of that has to do to the availability, the quantity, even the size. And when you match some of these tackle items, the gear that is involved in panfish, it's actually a very exciting opportunity because they fight hard on light rods. They'll give you a tug, and for those looking for something on the table, sunfish, crappies, even perch, whatever the panfish might be, they taste phenomenal. So you have a lot of opportunity there to have a good meal, to have some awesome action, and a lot of fish being caught there. But the technique specific I wanted to touch on today when you're talking about panfish, I want to talk about swimbait panfish. The swimbait options out there to catch big sunfish, big crappies, jumbo perch. What are some of the options that we're doing? It's common and typically seen as when you are targeting panfish, I'll get a dozen night crawlers, I'll get some waxworms, I'll get some minnows, I'll get something live bait like, so that when I'm fishing these fish, I fish a float, a bobber, a plain hook, and throw some live bait on there and then wait for one to bite. It does work, but I'm going to encourage you to start targeting panfish with plastics, namely swim baits. There's a lot of options out there for swim baits when it comes to panfish, and we'll go through a handful of those. We'll talk about a little bit of locational patterns as we jump into the early summer months. It is now the beginning of June, and for a lot of the panfish anglers, the bluegill anglers especially, starting to see fish sitting in on beds. You're starting to hone in on some of the shallow water areas. The early springtime where you look at water temperature, you're starting to focus on that. Those days are somewhat behind us. You're starting to look for structural patterns, starting to look for behavioral patterns, those sorts of things, not so much temperature based. So let's jump right into the swim baits, and then we'll talk about some locations and some efficiencies and techniques and how you can use these swim baits. So to start things off, I'm a huge fan of the Mr. Twister line of plastics. Those who know me know I've been using them for a long time, better part of a decade. Whether you're targeting bass, walleyes, pike, or like we're talking about now, panfish. So there's a lot of options out there for Mr. Twister when it comes to swim baits. And we'll start from small to big, talk about some ones that have been working for years, and talk about a couple new ones that are out here for the 2012 open water season. To start things off, profile-wise, I usually start the season small, and I jump into what is called the Mr. Twister Micro Shad. And this is just a little bodied shad. You can see it there. It's about 1 1/8 inches long, so it's just a hair over an inch. It's very small profiled. You can see it there. It's just a dangly little paddle tail, but this would be considered a small swim bait. I have pitched these out there with 32nd-ounce jigs, 64-ounce jigs, and swam them back to shore or swim them back to the boat. They have a little thumb tail on there, so it really bounces around when you're reeling those in. This is also an excellent option under a float when the bluegills are up on their bed spawning or up in the shallow waters. It's a small enough profile, so no matter whether they're aggressively eating or aggressively just attacking anything in their area, this gets in their mouth and you get a solid hook set. So the Mr. Twister Micro Shad comes in a variety of colors, has been one of my go-tos for shallow bedding fish, for shallow fish amongst lily pads. Again, it's a small profile. The biggest bluegills I've caught this season have come on this bait right here, some of which have gone 1.6 pounds, 1.7 pounds. So big fish will eat this without a doubt, and so will the smaller ones. And this works great for crappies, perch, bluegills, sunfish, brim, whatever you might be. This Mr. Twister Micro Shad works very, very well. And I couple that on a small 32nd-ounce collarless jig head, and the reason for no collar is that these smaller baits, they'll bunch up if they have a collar, so you want to thread them on straight so that you get the most and maximize your efficiency. So the Mr. Twister Micro Shad, an excellent option. Moving up the row of swim baits, the Sassy Shad. The Mr. Twister Sassy Shad has been around for a long time. Most of us know about this bait right here. It catches us a lot of fish. This is just a 2-inch version. This will work great for sunfish, crappies, perch, walleyes, bass. I've cut about everything on there. And you can see there that has that little flap tail back on it. That's an excellent option for rigging on a 16th ounce jig, possibly even an 1/8 ounce jig. It gets a little light or heavy for an 1/8 ounce jig, but they do work well for deeper suspended crappies. And again, we're touching on Swimbait Panfish. So I'll pitch this bait out there and I'll swim it back to the boat. That thumbtail provides some vibration. It does catch a lot of fish. It does catch you a fair amount of bass too, and be careful because the toothy pike will snatch these up. These tasty little morsels for the big pike, they'll nail them pretty quick and game over. But the good thing about plastics, as we all know, is they're cost effective. You know, a bag of Mr. Twister, you know, Sassy Shads is only a couple bucks. You get 20, 24 of them, and away you go. You know, so for $10, you have enough to fish the whole weekend, probably with you, your 2 kids, you and your fishing partner, you and Grandma and Grandpa. It doesn't cost you a lot of money. So you're saving money in the long run when you're not purchasing live bait, when you start using some of these artificial options. So that Mr. Twister Sassy Shad, for me, an excellent option. I throw that in shallow water, deep water, you know, you name it. You can fish under a float, all sorts of options. And they come in a lot of available colors and variations. That was red and white. Here's a nice chartreuse and green. You can see that shows up real well. You got more natural colors like your browns and yellows. So sky's the limit on these Sassy Shads. They work exceptionally well for catching a lot of different types of fish. So it's my second option, one of my go-tos from Mr. Twister when it comes to Swimbait Panfish. Next on my list, I'm going to show you some new plastics for this year. And these are going to take in my opinion, it's a term I don't always like to throw out there, but these really are going to take the industry by storm when you're talking about panfish. I've had a chance to use these quite well this year, and I've caught some fish. They are taking these baits, even sunfish, crappies, you name it. So start things off, you know, you got the new Tri-Alive, tri-colored twister tail. And these are going to come in a variety of colors. You know, this just happens to be the 2-inch size. These are dynamite on bluegills, crappies, and perch. And the color patterns are really what sell this bait. You know, a lot of twister tails out there. Mr. Twister, as you know, is the original company that has designed the twister tail. But these new ones take it to another level. You have the most erratic colors as far as spectrums. You have red fleck entwined with silver and blue. You have white and blue with white and silver fleck. You have fire tigers. You have American flag colors. You have all these variations that really make the bait what it is. You know, here's one right here that is called Shiner. You got silver bottom, clear smoke top, black and blue fleck on it. That's a little twister tail that it gives you a lot of presentation as far as color goes. And these baits have been, like I said, phenomenal for me. I've caught big bluegills, big crappies, big perch. I've caught bass on these this year. An excellent option. You know, that Tri-Alive, that new Tri-Alive Mr. Twister 2-inch Tri-Alive twister tail, you know, in a variety of colors. Phenomenal option. The one I'm really excited to show you is the new VIE Shiner, the VIE Shiner by Mr. Twister. And that's a brand new bait for this year. It's going to be a minnow body. It's going to be about 1.5 inches long, 1 3/4 long. I'll hold that close enough. And what it has that's different than anything I've ever seen, it's got a double paddle tail on the back end. So the profile sits straight up, but that back end has a double paddle tail. A paddle tail on top of a paddle tail. What it does is it really slows down the fall and gives it a very natural action. I've pitched these around the shallows with a 16th ounce jig, and I'll cast into 2-3 feet of water, and it'll actually fall slow in the water. It's not going to drop like a rocket, snagging lily pads and weeds. So I can go amongst the lily pads, I can pitch it up there, and that bait will fall nice and slow as I'm working it. So I have no problem just fishing this without a float, fan casting into areas I want to target fish at, and just swimming it back to the boat in a natural manner. So it's very, very effective in that regard. It's soft, it's supple, fish can grab it, fish can take it, they can run with it. I've caught fish on beds, I've caught fish on deep weed lines, I've caught fish inside pockets, around lily pads, around docks, you name it. This will work well under a float, so you can apply a float system to this that can be removed. So if you are going to get amongst heavy cover, where casting and retrieving becomes a pain because you're snagging weeds, you can rig these baits underneath the float so you can keep the bait in the target zone, the proper strike zone as you're fishing. And then of course you can move the bobber and fan cast around open docks and open areas. So a very effective 2-part system when fishing swim baits as well is to apply some kind of float system. So there you go, you have the VIE Shiner from Mr. Twister, a very, very popular choice amongst a lot of anglers this year. And as you can see, the color patterns are pretty cool. White and silver with chartreuse tail. You have blue silver with silver fleck and chartreuse blue tail. So any color you can dream up as a panfish angler. I'm kind of a panfish dork. A lot of you that watch the show know that, and no matter the season, I'm usually targeting a lot of panfish. And the thing I like about these VIE shiners is they took some of the colors that we recommended for years, that have caught fish that we've cut off and glued different plastics together to get the colors that we wanted. Now they took those colors and made it an available color to the public. So very excited about the VIE shiner from Mr. Twister. It's going to catch me a lot more fish this season, and I hope it catches you some fish as well. Quick touching on the rod choices I use for swim baits. You know, again, there's a lot of options out there. I tend to go with a 7-foot rod. I like to fish a little longer rod so I can throw these baits out there. So if I'm fishing a 16th ounce jig and a light little Mr. Twister micro shad, I can fling it out there with a longer rod, and I go with usually a light action. You know, I'm not a big ultralight guy because they're a little too whippy, and when I set the hook into a fish, especially on any cover, I want to have a little more leverage to get it back. So I go with a 7-foot light action rod. This happens to be, you know, a St. Croix blank built at Thorn Brothers to my specifications. I did the drop shot handle on there, took some of the cork out to keep it very lightweight, put some titanium guides on there, so this rod weighs practically nothing. And again, it gives you the more comfort, control, and sensitivity to throw those lighter baits. Then I coupled with a 1000 series Shimano reel. This is a 1000 Saros that works very, very well. You know, I couple that with some, 5-pound or 4-pound test line, and again, a little 16th ounce or an 32nd ounce or whatever size jig head you decide, no collar, so you can thread those baits on there. And then I can pitch them out there a long distance. So something along, I would say something along 6.5 to 7 foot, light action rod. Put some 4-pound or 5-pound line in there. Get a small reel, but not an ultralight reel. You don't want one of those micro light 500 series or smaller reels. So I mean, this would be a little big for ice fishing. That's a good way to judge it. So this would be on your walleye ice fishing rods or your lake trout ice fishing rods, the 1000 series Shimano. And again, there's a lot of options, whether it be a Sahara, a Sedona, a Symmetry. No matter what direction you want to go, these work very well. And that beveled spool on those Shimano reels allows me to free cast. The line comes off so much smoother and more accurate. So when you're fishing these smaller baits, it maximizes my distance. So again, my rod and reel choice, 7-foot rod. You got a 1000 series Shimano, 5-pound line or 4-pound line. You can use some of the light Power Pro braids. They do come in 3- and 4-pound test braids now, so those are going to work exceptionally well if you're looking to do a braided line. So that'll match it up very well for the type of gear and the lures you're going to throw for these Swimbait panfish. Moving on to, again, the applications involved. I use a 2-part system. Here's a fill float, Supreme float. These can be removed if you want. You can peg them with a split shot. You can see that doesn't slide because I got 2 split shot pegging that in one place. Otherwise, it will be a slip bobber. And then you can adjust that anywhere along the rod you want, so that you get the maximized distance and depth, and I can cast these a little further with the weight. But then I can just pop this off, and I can fish this jig plain if I want to fan cast, like I said, around docks, pontoons, pylons, shallow stuff, whatever it might be. So it's a 2-part system to fish these swim baits. And you can fish a swim bait. You can aggressively fish a presentation with the float. Too many anglers think, oh, you're going to float fish, you cast, you sit and you watch. I will cast my presentation with the float, let it hit the bottom, and I will actually work it. I will work it back to the boat, nice and slow, and I will swim that bait at a desired depth horizontally. Nice thing about a float is it keeps it at that depth. If there's a certain strike zone, you can keep it right there in that fish's face. You got fish jumping all over the place here by the docks. But you can swim that right next back to the boat. It's very, very exciting. So you can fish several applications with a slip bobber float system / plain jig head. So very effective. Moving on a little bit, we'll touch about locational patterns for some of these swim bait fish. Like we said, I fish around shallow cover. I fish around docks. You can skip some of these baits. The Sassy Shad and the VIE Shiner are excellent options to skip underneath the dock. So you can skip them underneath the mouths of pontoons, dock pylons, shady areas. You catch a lot of fish that way, much like you would bass fishing. You go up along a shoreline and you pick out spots. You're spot casting as you fish. You flip that bait along there and try to work the areas. Or you can fish it around deeper cover. I like to fish outside weed edge this time of year. And again, swim baits, the nice thing about those is they're an excellent search lure. When I'm guiding them fishing for panfish, especially roamy crappies, it's not uncommon for me to have a swim bait on my line as I'm fan casting erratically amongst cover and amongst areas and amongst different depths to figure out where the fish are. So I'll fish a swim bait so I can figure out location, and then I might hone in my tactics with maybe a slip float, a smaller swim bait, something along those lines to get them to go. So again, I will fish these. Basically, the idea here, what I'm trying to point out, is swim baits from a foot of water to 25 feet of water, and everywhere in between. They're very, very effective. You know, open water humps, crappies will suspend and stack up on an open water hump. I'll cast swim baits and fish a little more aggressively and get the thump of that tail working, so I can cover water and effectively target fish. So when it comes to swim baits, sky's the limit. You're targeting swim baits, using swim baits for panfish. It's very exciting. I'll tell you what, you're going to get the most aggressive fish out of a school. You're going to get the hard thump in his hook set. I've been fishing bluegills quite a lot the last few weeks here with a lot of clients and close friends, and I've shared a lot of laughs, and I've seen professional bass anglers. John Hewitt came with me, and we took him out fishing. He said, you know what, Matt, I've never caught sunfish like this. I feel like I'm 5 years old. At times he was just laughing and giggling, and we were fishing the Mr. Twister Micro Shad, the VIE Shiner. A lot of these baits that allow you to effectively cover water, and they're fun to fish. So next time you're going to target panfish, maybe consider leaving the max worms and the night crawlers and the minnows at home. Pick up some of these plastics from Mr. Twister. Give it a shot. I can promise you're going to catch just as many fish, if not more, and probably bigger fish. The little dinky sunfish pecking at your night crawler are not going to be as prevalent, and you're going to catch larger fish that you want to hold up for a picture and have a good time. I'll show a couple snapshots here from the last couple of days that we were fishing of some big bluegills. Again, we've had a lot of fun out here chasing bluegills this year. Swimbait Panfish. Give it a shot. Have some fun. We're getting into the heart of summer. Even the dog days of summer when the fish are in deeper, cooler water, especially the swim bait comes in handy when you're fishing bluegills, crappies, perch. So, Matt Johnson here, Deck Talk. Thanks for watching Swimbait Panfish. Get out there and try it, and we'll catch you next week.